Good afternoon and welcome to a webinar on Lightning Lane data. My name is Graham Brooks. I'm owner and creator of Thrill Data. So today we're going to walk through a series of different topics related to Lightning Lane data, primarily at Disney World since it's a little more complicated, but a lot of it's still applicable to Disneyland as well. So some of the things we'll go through, we'll talk about pre-booking versus day of nomenclature. That'll be important when we start going through some of the data. On the pre-booking side, we'll look at the 21-day availability data, how to kind of interpret it, some of the different things we can analyze from that at the park and attraction level. I'll show you how to look at what the availability is just at 7 a.m. So when booking windows start opening at 7 a.m. Eastern, you can get an idea of what's available or not then. We get into some of how you can view and track current and historical prices, whether prices have any correlation with actual bigger crowds and things like that. We'll also touch on the Lightning Lane Premier Pass, the data that's associated with it. So we'll get into some of the day of data about, so when you're in the parks, what kind of availability you might have, when additional releases may appear, then also how you can use the alert system in light lanes. Then hopefully at the end we'll have some time, we can do some question and answer. Feel free to use the chat box throughout this. Try to take a look periodically and answer any questions that come up, or feel free to use your voice here as well. I'll try to answer as we go along. All right, so everything today is going to be a live demonstration. So I'll be going through everything on the website itself, and we'll go through each topic, and this is stuff everybody should be able to access on their own, either now or in the future. So on the homepage of the website, most of the stuff we'll be talking about today is all accessible under the section called Lightning Lane under Disney Data Essentials. So there's a whole bunch of links related to Walt Disney World as well as Disneyland, where we can get access to different information. So really, you kind of have, especially for Disney World, you have the two facets. You have the pre-booking period. So the period either 3 or 7 days before your check-in date, where you can start booking Lightning Lanes. And then you have the behavior of day of, where you're trying to, in the parks, you're redeeming Lightning Lanes, you're trying to get more. So a lot of the stuff will be split between those two topics today, where we're looking at the pre-planning portion, and then how do we get the Lightning Lanes, or our second and third selections in park after we kind of redeem one or two of our pre-booking selections. So if we click this button that says Walt Disney World Dashboard, this is going to take us to the 21-day availability. So with the multi-pass and single pass changes that came last July, the windows changed from being just day of, being able to book Lightning Lanes, to a variable booking window depending on how your vacation sets up. Still different than FastPass Plus back in the day, where it used to be about 60 days for resort guests. Now we have kind of a rolling 21-day window where you have availability and options. So Disney resort guests have the biggest advantage with the new system, where they can book 7 days from check-in for up to 14 days of their ticket. So that basically gives you a 21-day window where you can book Lightning Lanes, and typically availability gets better the further out you go from the actual current date or the date of the visit. The offsite guests or the annual pass holders basically get a 3-day they can book, and by that time during visit periods, selections are going to be certainly different than or further out in time. So this page right here contains a lot of information, and it updates pretty frequently. So basically every minute we're polling and getting new availability data directly from my Disney experience and updating it here. So if I scroll down, there's a little bit of help. So there's some help topics if you get some of you or your clients need to have some more information about what Lightning Lanes are, why the windows are what they are. Some good information here, including if you click on like, can I book you can see some tables of when, depending on your check-in date or your visit date, when you might be able to book for the next, I think this shows about 90 days or so. So that's good. So tomorrow I'll open up a new booking window. So guests will start be able to have a check-in next Friday. We'll be able to start booking tomorrow and so on. It's a good reference. Same for the offsite guests. So if we get down to the tables themselves, so there's a couple options with these. So each table, there's going to be one version per park. And by default, it's going to show these little markers that indicate whether there's availability and when the earliest available return time is that we've pulled is. So the color coding is basically if it's green, it's in the morning, so sometime before noon, afternoon, sometime between 12 and 5, evening would be something. So the return time is typically kind of indicative of whether there's good availability or not. So typically, if the earliest available return time is in the evening, everything prior to that's been booked up. So that means that attractions more popular, being booked up, and may reach capacity at some time soon. You also have the option to directly show the return times. So anywhere you see this little toggle button, you can click that and it'll switch between showing the markers to actually show the latest pull return time. Because of how this Disney system works, I mean, every time you refresh your poll, you'll get some random return time. So, one instance, you may see an early return time appear for a time. The next one may be later. It's just part of the randomness of the Disney system. And so don't get too stuck on the return time on a given pool. If it shows it's kind of out of whack for something else, so it's probably just a random occurrence that somebody changed their events and things. So how do we read this table? So depending on your screen width, it's going to be different. So this table's typically much better viewed on a desktop device or a laptop versus a mobile. But you can on those devices, you have a scroll bar to go to the side. So on the top of each of these tables, you basically have the applicable Lightning Lane eligible attraction. Both multi-pass and single pass attractions are mixed within this table. And then down the left-hand side, you have the bookable date. So it goes from the current date to 21 days out in the future, based on the booking windows we discussed earlier. So most guests can't book far out because most, only the on-site guests that are 7 days from check-in with a 14-day ticket can book some of these further out dates. So typically availability is great out there. If you have a long vacation, you're going to have no problem getting the Lightning Lane selections that you want.
So guys,
My
plan
Yes.
for Disney is they have a bunch of different rides at Disney World than they have at Disneyland.
Yeah.
And we're gonna try and ride the different ones.
I want to do the Aerojet Expedition. That was my favorite.
I have,
One more time?
I want to try and do all of the different rides that they don't have at Disneyland. Like we've ridden like Pirates of the Caribbean like 1,000 times, but like what they don't have is like the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train.
Oh, it's fire. No, we're hearing you, Mom.
Yeah, I definitely want to do Aerojet Expedition and some sort of
Wait, I lost my sound.
you might have muted the.
No, I can't.
Is there a question? Or I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No problem. So in terms of availability, you can sort this data with any of these little options if you want in different ways. Then everything on this graph is also clickable. So I'll get into that in just a moment as well. So this graph shows the earliest available Lightning Lane return time, or if there's no availability, show NA or the little X marker for each attraction at each of the different Walt Disney World theme parks. So this is a live update from my Disney experience. So if I click on it, if I want more details about a specific attraction, I can either click on its name up top, or I can click on any of the times down below, and it'll take me to some more details. So for example, if I go to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, it opens up a more detailed page specifically about that attraction. On the left-hand side, it gives me the same 21 days that are currently bookable. If I keep scrolling down, I can also get data from any past date. So since the system began in July, I can sort and click any other previous date and see what its data history was. So that's useful trying to figure out trends, especially if you're planning for a visit further out in the future. In the center, you have the just a miniature version of the tables on the previous page, but just broken down for the specific attraction of interest. And then on the right-hand side, this is some statistics on how often availability is before, how often there is lightning lane availability at a certain number of days before visit. So 21 days would be the first out. You could possibly from a visit date. And typically availability is pretty good for this for Seven Doors Mine Train until you start getting into 7 days before. That's kind of when the booking windows start opening, and by the day of, the availability percentages get really low as you get closer. So this is a data stream taken over a wide swath of periods. So as you get to a busy period like right now, spring break, the numbers may be a little bit different than you see here because these are averages over a longer period of time. As we scroll down the page, we can also get a map of what today's availability has been. So each blue dot represents availability. So these are basically either random pop-ups of people changing, or sometimes there's some additional releases that we'll get into a little bit later. We can also see what the same day availability has been in terms of heat map form. So basically, this is this graph plotted for the past 30 days. So this is same day availability. So this is if you're in the parks, this is what availability looks like as you're trying to obtain lightning lanes on the day of your visit. So this graph will show in gray if there's no availability, and then a color that represents the time of day that the best earliest available return time appeared within that time period. So when you're looking at a graph like this, what you're looking for is kind of vertical stacks. So we see this is sometime around 215 to 220. There's often availability. So this is indicative that there's consistent lightning lane releases around that time. And that information gets parsed out a little bit in some other pages we'll get to a little bit later in this presentation. But that's kind of the key thing to look at in terms of this 30-day heat map is how often is there lightning lane available at a given time of day. And this graph further breaks that down and basically does a count of each occurrence of availability at a given time of day. So if you counted all these little stacks within this column here, you can see it lines up well with being, let's see, it's 27, I think it says. You zoom in. You can click on any graph to zoom in. So even like this one, if you click and drag a box, it will zoom in. You can get more details and you can hover over everything as well. So at 2:17 p.m. out of the past 30 days, there's been lightning lane availability for Seven Doors Mine Train. So that tells you is that that's a great time to refresh My Disney Experience to try to get availability because Disney typically releases additional availability at that point. It's not a random occurrence of people just changing since it happens so frequently. So this graph kind of keeps track of what those individual times are. And down below it, you can also see what the most frequent times are. So if I click afternoon times, it's going to give me a table of how many times sorted by occurrence availability has occurred at a given point. So how you use this information, you say, okay, if I'm trying to get a single pass, it was sold out in the pre-booking period. So at 2:17, 2:18, 2:19 on the day of my visit, I'm going to refresh My Disney Experience and hopefully Seven Doors Mine Train will appear with availability there that I can purchase the single pass for. You can also extend this out to some different time frames. So by default, it's showing the 30 days. You can also do a smaller sample set. So if we do 7 days, it'll take me to another graph and it'll show you the distribution of that data and how often it's happening within that time period. So the data does change over time. So certain trends may be applicable for a few months, then they may change. There may be different release points. It's not known what Disney's actually doing to release this data, but it does seem like they do have additional releases probably based on how well the attraction's running. They may hold some back, and in case the attraction has some technical difficulties, and once it's operating well, they may release more at those specific points that they've decided on. So that's kind of a summary of an attraction itself, but you can also get details on a given date. So if we take a look at the Lightning Lane availability for tomorrow, we can also get quite a bit more details on what's happening with that. All right, so the first graph shows a time history of Lightning Lane availability for the date of March 14th, going back to the time period it was first released, which at this point will be 20 days ago. So back at that point, there's tons of availability because there's the booking windows open. So each of these vertical lines represents 7 a.m. On a given day as it gets closer to the date of actual occurrence. So since it's tomorrow, we're one day from that event. So this was 7 a.m. today. You can see what the availability was. Like the other graphs, you can start zooming in. So typically availability doesn't change a whole lot for the first 7+ days of the event until some more booking windows start happening, especially until you get really within that 10-day window, you start to see some more bookings happening. So if I zoom in just on that period, you can see between the 9th day and 8th day to go, essentially we had a lot more vacations coming in since you had people hitting that 7-day window, and then they're probably staying 3 to 7 days. The booking starts picking up and the return times start getting later in the day until eventually around the 7-day mark, you hear it first reach capacity. And there are occurrences where there are additional availability releases or people are changing plans. There's no way to exactly tell, but some action does happen once an attraction reaches capacity during the pre-booking period. So you're not always out of luck just because it disappeared by a certain date. There could be some random availability, and I'll show you how you can set up alerts to track some of that when they pop up. So if you keep scrolling down, this is the same graph that you just saw, but in terms of heat map form. So instead of being the time scale that goes from the 21st day out to now, it basically stacks each day on top of each other, and you can see when availability occurs at a given time of day or not. So like the same day availability, you'd want to look for stacks of vertical lines to see if there's consistent releases at a time. But for the most part, there's not a whole lot of action in terms of consistent releases in the pre-booking period that we've been able to determine. The graph down below is very similar to that one, just plotted in dot form. So it's basically taking out the days to go and condensing it down to a single time a day. You can, again, look for trends on here. So if there are any trends that are found, if you keep scrolling down the page, you'll see it on these tables down here. So this is basically tracking occurrences of pop-ups and what time they occur. You can sort by the total number of occurrences. So if something happens once, it's probably random. If it happens several times, it's probably not random. But for the most part, the data says a lot of the things are just purely random. So, I mean, there's a slight chance maybe around the 10 o'clock hour each night that you may have some pop-up availability for 7 dwarfs, but still a pretty low chance. Keep scrolling down. Finally, we also track if there's earlier releases, like earlier return time releases consistently. You can also see that in the heat map above, where the color changes to like from a red to a green or a yellow color, that's indicating it's earlier in the day. So if secured a lighting lane, but you're trying to get it modified to an earlier time, you can use this information to try to pinpoint what times are best to keep checking for an earlier release point. So in this case, around 7:18 in the morning, it's happened 4 times where they've released a bit earlier availability. So let's see if we can see that heat map too. So 7:18, somewhere in this range. So you can see sometimes where the color changes drastically within a certain point means there's been a change in the return time that's available. So you can view that for any day that's current or past. So just for example, let's go back to just say Valentine's Day. So since this happened in the past, we can get the complete picture of something that happened as well. So now you can see the days go all the way to 0, which is the day of visit. You can see what availability was happening then. The heat maps fill out for all that information as well. You can look up past total occurrences of any availability and so on. Let me check our questions, see if we have any real quick. Can you please show me one more time how to get to this page? Sure, I'll just go back through this. So everything lighting lane is gonna be in this section on the home page. To get to the 7 doors page, I clicked Walt Disney World dashboard, and then I clicked on 7 Doors Mine Train. That takes me to this page where I can then get to specific dates that are occurring for this particular attraction. You can just do it for any of the available attractions as well. Do you think it makes sense to review this data monthly, or do you think trend changes more frequently and should be monitored more bi-weekly? I think they typically aren't changing on a week-to-week basis. It seems to be probably every few months they'll change. The busy periods make it harder. It's tough to say during the busy periods whether it's the data still appearing or it's just getting booked up faster than when we actually check for the data it's there or not. Because as more people become aware that 7 Doors Mine Train releases availability at 7 or 2:17 p.m., more people are going to start refreshing there, and it may get booked up before we can even capture it. So that makes the trend disappear. So there's things like that can affect whether it's actually a trend or not over time too. So it's always an interesting thing to pull a game, but I mean, it's worthwhile. So all these statistics get updated all the time. So as new data comes in every minute, I mean, these numbers would update. It'll take a lot of data to make the overall trends change just based on changing an average data set of 8+ months now. But it certainly could happen. Check the questions again real quick. How would you recommend use this tool when you're not staying on property and only reserve 3 days out? So that's a good question. And that's a good lead into the next topic of availability at 7 a.m. So if I go back to the home page real quick. So under availability data, so we're looking at the dashboard here. There's also this is the same information. If you click this page, it goes back to the same one as well. But underneath that, there's a 7 a.m. pre-booking availability. So this is going to break down specifically that 7 a.m. mark at each day to go to a visit for each possible visit date. So by default, it's going to show the current date here. So this is the 13th, which is today. So if I scroll down to the data, you can pick up a different park. So you can use these options to quickly jump because there's a bunch of little tables in between here because it's showing the 21-day period for everything. You can start breaking down the data to see what's actually occurring, a little bit more details. So let's go to tomorrow. Data's looking like something's not this. Okay, here we go. Part of the Magic Kingdom day was getting cut off for some reason there. So if we take a look at the Epcot data, we can go backwards in time from today to previous days to see what availability was like at a given point in time. So for an offsite guest, you're starting to book at this 3-day mark. If we can take a look at specifically what the availability is at when the window opens for those offsite guests at 7 a.m. to get an idea of what's been available and what's typically available at that point. So over at Epcot, Guardians of the Galaxy had already been sold out, and then between 7 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., nothing had appeared for that attraction. But the other ones you can see kind of bounce around a little bit. If you ever see a gray check mark, that means that the status appeared as available, but we weren't able to capture the return time, which happens sometimes. So the status within the system was available, just the return time didn't come out because things are changing so rapidly at these points. Sometimes that occurs. Now, if we just scroll down and see what it was like at 7 days to go, a lot of windows open. You can see a lot more green, indicating earlier return times were available for those resort guests that started booking here. Guardians of the Galaxy was still available at that point. So this data gives you a nice snapshot of just kind of what the pictures were in time at a given point when the booking windows open. You can also plot them in terms of the return times directly if you click one of those toggle buttons too. So you can do this for any current or past day. It'll go through each of the different windows. So let's take a look at Hollywood Studios coming up for the 15th, which will be Saturday. So for those offsite guests that were booking today, Slinky Dog had brief availability right at 7 a.m., but then didn't disappear for the rest of the window. Rise of Resistance was kind of hit or miss. You probably had people booking a time here and maybe they exited out because they didn't really want a late return time. We'll see what that return time was. Yeah, so 7+ o'clock for some of those return times that were captured here. When it did have availability, so you probably had people drop, somebody would click it and they'd block it out for 5 minutes and they'd drop it or change their selection, leading to a little bit of variation in what was available at a given time. So that's a good tool to see, when those booking windows are, what's been available, you can research in the past and get an idea of what priorities to select at a given time. I'm also going to go back to this page, and over here on the right-hand side, or if you keep scrolling down, there's another menu bar down here. You can get the same menu. There's some more statistics basically breaking down the pre-booking data. So for example, we click average availability. This will give you the idea of how often an attraction has been available at a given number of days to go to visit over a certain time period. So by default, it's showing all data since July 2024, but you can also change that to the past 30 days to get an idea of what the most recent trend has been. So let's take a look at Hollywood Studios, for example. Sometimes you'll get attractions that aren't offered anymore. Like up here, you saw Thunder Mountain's been closed, or Jingle Cruise is only seasonal. They'll appear on these graphs, but they'll show 0% just because they haven't been around, or like the Living with the Land, Christmas overlay and things like that. So based on this Slinky Dog Dash, if I'm taking a look at this, if the availability percentage quickly drops once you hit that 7-day mark. There is some booking, 8+ days in advance, but once you really get within 5 days, the odds of getting availability are quite low, based on what the data has been showing the past 30 days. So the odds are an offsite guest is can have very little chance of getting Slinky Dog Dash in the pre-booking period. And the odds of getting a decent return time are probably pretty low too.
What's up?
Have you gotten any sheets that are not yours? You said none of the sheets.
Also, this page here, where you can see on average how many days before a trip the initial capacity is reached. So we can sort this from high to low. I think it froze. There we go. Come on.
I love you. No cavities.
All right, so you can see here that for the Magic Kingdom, Tiana's Bayou Adventure has been the most selling out the furthest number of days to visit, around almost 6 days to visit, based on all data. But we can also sort this based on a more recent time frame. We can see if we pass 30 days, it actually switches down to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and then Tron. So 2 single pass attractions are your most in demand. Then followed by, in the multi-pass category, you got Tiana's almost 5 days in advance. It's reaching capacity for the first time. That doesn't mean that there's not additional pop-up availability. It just means that that's the first time it's reached capacity and gone that way for more than several minutes. You can also look at Epcot here. We can basically see that Cosmic Rewind is the most in demand there, followed by Remy and Frozen. But at least here, those offsite guests at least have a chance, since it's selling out a bit earlier or a bit later and closer to the days of visit. Let me see. Got some questions here, quick. I'll get into the pop-up releases in just a moment here. We can also look at return times by day. This will give an average of, at a given point of time, what's the most likely return time to be available. So in this case, typically the closer you get to the visit, the return times increase. This just kind of gives you an idea of the day may be.
Yeah, right. Stop by and get you something to eat. I'm going to school, right?
This page summarizes any additional release points. So this will check basically from the 21st day out to the day of visit whether there's additional
You
availability.
would know better than me. I have no idea.
Let me see if I can mute this.
What's your guess?
So this is starting it into basically those additional release points or pop-up availability, whatever nomenclature you want to go by. So this includes both day of visit as well as the pre-booking period. So this, by default, is going to show all the data points since MultiPass started last July. But you can also narrow down to the last 30 or 60 days to give a more clear picture of what times to possibly check for. So what's interesting in a lot of this data is that most of the pop availability occurs on the day of visit. So you see that day 0. Let's see if there's any available in the pre-booking. So 3 days to trip, Tron has been releasing availability around 7:15 a.m. So right around that, the offsite guest booking period, it seems to have some additional availability that's been consistent for a few days at least. You can always go to the specific Tron page to get some more details on that and see if there's any specific trends that we can hone in on. So you can always click on a date and see if it's consistently showing availability at around that time in the morning.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Does that dark green color on that previous page that you were on, does the color of the green, no, just the page that you,
Yeah.
yes, the timing page. Yes, the one that is open in that small window on the top. Yes. Do these colors matter? Like what the dark green, does it mean more available? I see all light green here, but there are some of those timings which are shaded in a darker shade of green.
Correct. So
Or
this is a
most often.
30.
Okay, I didn't read that. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think like so this is we're narrowed down to the past 30 days. So the most often will have occurred at least 15 times those 30 days, compared to probably I think it's around 7 or 8 on the less often side. So it's happened several times, but the odds of it always happening are less.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so if like Seven Doors Mine Train, the past 30 days. So on the other graph, you saw it appear that 217 a bunch of times, like 27 times. You see it appear again here as well, being a very common, very often point. So if he's just scrolling through this, I mean, there's not a lot of pre-booking availability that consistently reappears. So that means during that period, you're basically at the whim of random releases. So basically, Disney's not releasing anything available. You're dependent on users changing their mind and modifying to times or whatnot, or changing their selections to have availability at a given point until you get to that day of visit. And similarly, there's also the information for the earlier release times. Are there consistent points where these are attractions that aren't sold out, but they release earlier availability at a given point in time. If you're trying to modify your plans to get things earlier in the day compared to the initial later return times you had. So this has some different data and that pops up depending on the given attraction. That's a little bit different than just trying to find availability for stuff when that's sold out already. Let me check the questions real quick. Some suggestions. There's a question about why did Beauty and Beast show sell out so much beforehand? There was a period there last month for like 2 or 3 weeks. For some reason, there was no availability for the attraction. The attraction had not shut down, but it didn't really make sense why there wasn't lightning. I still don't have an answer necessarily on that. But it'll show on these charts as being sold out because there was no availability. So it kind of skews the data a little bit, but it doesn't really make sense why it disappeared for a period last month. More often means every day. It means a percentage of the time period. So depending on how you're filtering the data. So if more often would mean like 15 out of 30 days or 20 out of 30 days or 30 out of 60 days and so on would be most often. Disney releases different types of availability is a question. Some slots for people that have yet to book a Lightning Lane pass, and other times for people that already have a pass on a different time, or is it the same? It's all the same availability, but people are changing their selections, especially during the pre-booking period. Now, the same day, there seems to be evidence that Disney releases additional availability because you have such strong indicators at certain points of the day that there's availability that's it's beyond the reason of just being random availability. During the pre-booking period, the evidence points to that people are just changing their selections around. So Disney's not changing availability. People are either selecting earlier or later return times. People are changing what selections they had, so they maybe they had the Barnstormer and they switched it to Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, or vice versa. And that's some of the availability you see, but it's not Disney saying, okay, we're releasing 100 more slots of Pirates of the Caribbean at this time. There's just not much evidence in the pre-booking period that's something they're doing. All right, let's jump to another topic here real quick. So pricing, there's a couple different pages you can look at pricing under on the homepage. You can enter pricing data. You can see a page that's just purely the multipass pricing that goes all the way back to last July. You can sort this again. You'd see what the pricing is over time, complete history of it. You can also get to the single pass pricing that there's been over the same time period. And there's also, if I click this, either on the homepage, there's a link under the pricing there, or I can click this multi-pass pricing analysis. This gives a little bit more details on the pricing information. You can see what the min and max have been, the average prices are since the multi-pass system's been in place. And then we also have some graphs about how do pricing and wait times compare. So resort wide, this is basically this is the highest pricing that we see from the Magic Kingdom plotted against the daily average wait times resort wide. You can kind of see if there's any trends, or does a price necessarily indicate a busier day or not. And this is in graph, kind of a bar graph form. But if I scroll down, it does a breakdown basically by park against its pricing and average wait times. We can also see if there's any trends in terms of which days are more expensive for Lightning Lane. There's slight differences, but I mean, you're talking within $1 each, so there's not necessarily a bias towards a certain day that's typically been cheaper or not. But down here, we can start getting to these correlations. So basically, what is the average wait time at each Lightning Lane price point? So resort wide, this is using the Magic Kingdom pricing since the most expensive. You can see the general trend is that as the price of multipass goes up, wait times go up. But we can break that down even further by plotting a scatter of each day within the multipass system, going back to last July versus the average wait times for each of those days, resort wide, and see if there's any kind of linear trend. So each of these graphs, you can see the general upwards trend with a R-squared coefficient around 0.2 or 0.3, I think, for most of the parks. So there's some correlation, but not a particularly strong correlation, where if the multi-pass price is really high, that the wait times are going to be very high that day. But there is some general trend where, the higher the price, typically Disney expects it to be a busier day, but sometimes their projections are off, especially when you're doing this 21 days in advance, where the weather information is not necessarily known, where the price may be $39 to go to Magic Kingdom on a day, but it's a complete washout, so the wait times are really low, so it affects the math and the correlation there. So don't always be discouraged if the price is high for a multi-pass. It's not necessarily indicative that the park's going to slam that day or not. All right, so let's jump to Premier Pass real quick. All right, so Premier Pass, and the premium option to basically get in any Lightning Lane at a park has kind of ramped up in demand as they've gone from being deluxe resort guests only to any Disney resort to everybody now. So what we're really seeing now is demand for this product, especially for Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, has been quite high, especially as we get into busier periods. So we saw it last month around the President's Day holiday and the winter break period for a lot of schools, that there's a lot of demand. It was selling out pretty well in advance. We're also seeing that now as we get into the heart of the spring break season over the next few weeks. So this page right here will always show a snapshot of the current availability and the pricing for the next 21 days, same 21-day period for multipass. You can also go back in time and look at any given date and see what the prices were here on the left-hand side. And on this page, if we scroll down a little bit, we can get a park by park breakdown that also calculates the number of days before the day of visit that the Premier Pass has been selling out. So you can see here in recent days. So for the 21st, which is more than a week out, that sold out at 10:49 a.m. this morning. So there's been a lot of demand from those resort guests that have that longer booking period, that they're booking it up for future dates for that 7-day window even appears for some guests. So people that have booking windows that open up tomorrow won't have that option to book the 21st at the Magic Kingdom. It's been selling out that far in advance. Similar story to Hollywood Studios. We're starting to book out further in advance next week as well. If I scroll down this page, you can also get an average of days before sellout over the past 30 days that's been happening as well. And for each day, you can see when that particular Premier Pass sold out on a given time. So some days is 0, so that means day of it's sold out or never sold out. You can also view all the past data for these as well. So going back to whenever Premier Pass started last year, you can start to get an idea of when everything sold out. But the trend right now is that there's a lot of demand for Magic Kingdom. It's been typically selling out, over a week in advance. So those offsite guests that can start booking at 3 days out have very little chance right now for Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios. But typically you have the option available at Epcot or Animal Kingdom. All right, so most of what we've talked about has been with the pre-booking period, and there's also a lot of demand once you're in the park of how do I get more than my money's worth out of multi-pass by making additional selections, or if I couldn't get a single pass in their pre-booking period, what are my odds of getting something day of? So a couple more pages that are useful for that as well. In terms of under the availability data section, there's a page called same day sellout times. So this gives a summary of basically what's been available on the day of visit for each attraction for today, the previous day, then the average for the past week and past month. Back in the Genie Plus system, this is really all that mattered, since you didn't have the pre-booking and Connect selection, you had to really monitor when something would reach capacity on a given day. But it's still somewhat applicable now because sometimes there's overnight availability the day of that you can snag to get an attraction that you couldn't during the pre-booking period that wasn't there. So this page is useful to see when things have been selling out on the day of visit. But a lot of things, some of the high demand attractions like Remy's Ratatouille Adventure or Flight of Passage, Na'vi River Journey, when they are selling out the day of visit, and oftentimes they're in the overnight hours when there's just some random availability that appears. And then we can take a look at this link. This is a very important one for same day additional release times. So this is that pop availability or additional availability that statistically has been occurring. So this page in particular keeps track of the past 30 days, and it summarizes the times that are most likely to have availability for a given attraction. And these are the attractions that the data have the attractions that within the data we've identified that have that pop-up availability on a consistent basis. Because it's occurring so consistently, so it's happening at least 15 out of 30 days. It's not just a random chance that somebody was changing a lightning lane at a given time. And statistically, these should be pretty decent times to check for availability. So for each park, it's going to list any attractions that have been identified and meeting that at least 15 out of 30 day criteria. And the number of times that has been found that are consistently releasing. So if we click on an attraction, so one that's always popular is Slinky Dog Dash. That's one of the hardest lightning lanes to get. It'll take us down to its particular section, and it'll break down which particular times have been popping up. So it's typically in the past 30 days, 8:32, 8:54 a.m. in the morning are good times to refresh my Disney experience and try to get availability there. Notice that's before the park typically opens, so it's additional availability that you'd have to have a a slot available within your pre-bookings to actually do that or try to modify to that particular time since you haven't been able to redeem a slot yet. But then in the afternoons around 3:47 p.m., there's a consistent release point there. Again, during high demand times, there can be a lot of people trying to get that same spot. So it's not guaranteed that we'll have availability then, but the data says it's been pretty consistently happening there. Go back to the top. Another popular one's Remy's Right to Leave Venture at Epcot. So if I find this availability, it's been having some consistent early morning releases. There's also one afternoon spot at 1:47 that's been very popular. Consistently occurring where you can try to get snag that lightning lane slot if you weren't able to previously. So this data updates every day in real time. So as things happen or not, and it drops out, you may see things appear here or not appear there. And this is a really good way to get additional light lane availability for things that are sold out or reach capacity you couldn't get in the pre-booking period, just based on trends that have been identified in the data. There's no guarantee that something's going to pop up this time. I mean, Disney seems to release this consistently, but one day they may not have it. Maybe the attraction was not operating well, or for some reason they just didn't do it. But over time, these have been pretty consistent release points that are worthwhile to check. All right, so you've probably noticed on some of these things that there's stuff about it. We can't get availability, set up an alert. So that's another option. We can set up an alert to automate. So anytime the system gets availability for something that's alert set for, it will send you a text message saying, hey, this is available. You can try to book it. So you could set up an alert for any attraction, either day of visit or within the pre-booking period. So for example, Tron's a good one since one typically sold out. If I'm visiting, let's say on Saturday, I can set up a search to only search Saturday if I want. So if I set this to the 15th, it'll just search the same day availability. Or I can search starting now, since I'm in a window, I can say 13th. It'll start looking for availability now. So anything in the pre-booking period that pops up, it'll alert me for, and I can try to book it within the system. And then you can set a particular time window of the day or portion of the day that you want to search for. So if you're only looking for something in the evening, you can limit that to a search window of this. So if anything, there may be available that pops up at 9 a.m., but if it doesn't, it won't alert you to that because it's not within the time window here of the evening, which will be after 6 p.m. So when an alert fills, it's going to send you an email and text message. So in the pre-booking period, it can be difficult to modify. The system has a lot of the Disney side has a lot of overlapping rules and things that, there may be availability, but if for some reason it lets you book, you'll see a lot of complaints on that about online. We have no way to get around that either. The system says there's availability, but it lets you book is out of our control. So sometimes it takes several chances to try to modify an attraction to get to and be able actually to book it or modify or change whatever you may have in that scenario. Now, day of visit, typically alerts work a little bit better, but you just have to be quick. There's typically a lot of competition for a lot of these slots. So there's a lot of people trying to get Tron availability on day of, or for any of the multi-pass attractions as well. So when their alert comes out, you'll get a link within the text that you can click, and it's going to try to start the process of booking for you within My Disney Experience. It's just a link that automatically takes you to like the party selection page essentially within the app. And once you select your party, once you click next, that's when you'll find out if there's actually availability left or not. So hopefully when you do that, it'll say you've blocked the spot for 5 minutes, and you can make the purchase or the selection if you're using multi-pass and go on your way from there. But typically you'll have cases where there's a lot of competition for the spot's been taken by somebody just refreshing My Disney Experience itself, and it's already gone. So it may take several times. So it's a game of patience and persistence trying to get some of these lightning lane slots, especially when you're during busy periods right now. There's a lot of competition trying to get the same information. Check the questions here. Does it work for another country phone number? So that it should. Yeah, I know there's been quite a few. I know US, Canada, Mexico, I've had Brazil, Great Britain, that I've seen in the results. If it doesn't work, just let me know. Sometimes it's either sometimes there's a carrier issue or sometimes it's the within the system enabling a certain country or not. But just let me know if there's issues when you try to work through them. But I know Brazil for sure has worked for quite a few people. That's my content for today. Lightning lanes can be certainly a point of anxiety for a lot of guests, and there's certainly some challenges to getting into them. But hopefully, some of the using the data that is available and some of the alert techniques and figuring out which times things tend to pop up, you can actually help beat the system a little bit and give help yourself or your clients get the the vacation they want. So feel free to ask, and I'll hang out here for a minute and see if there's any questions. But otherwise, thank you for attending and thank you for your support. So same strategy available for Universal as well. Well, Universal is basically Premier Pass only, right? So the Express Pass there, you just walk up to an attraction, get in the Express line, and don't have to worry about making bookings or anything like that. So they're generally a lot easier as well. Same goes for Disneyland. They're more like the Genie Plus system was here, where you book everything day of. You book one at a time. You have the 2-hour limits and stuff until you redeem them, and you can't actually book till you enter the parks themselves. So it's a lot simpler. Plus, there's not every attraction at this parks is set up for the lightning lane either. So it's generally a lot more chill over there. But average trains, yes, I have done presentations like this to a few travel agencies so far. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me as well at thrilldataofficial@gmail.com. It should be on the website too, or any of the socials. We can certainly set up some sessions like that too. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody.